Hello everyone, Ember here, and welcome back to a new video. In this one, I'm going to be taking a look at some upcoming Scizor budget decks from the set Temporal Forces. So if you need a bit of a recap on what Scizor does, it does 10 damage base for a single metal energy, which isn't very impressive, of course. However, it does 50 more damage for each of your opponent's Pokemon in play that has an ability. So you are hitting huge damage against most decks in post-rotation format, of course, but one big issue with this deck, and one thing that I will point out immediately, and one thing is quite scary about Scizor, is it is relying on your opponent having abilities out in play. So a very, very competent player will, of course, manage their bench very well, and they will, essentially try their best to play around Scizor. Now, that's easier said than done in some matchups. Charizard, for example, kind of has to put abilities in play, stuff like Liepard and Pidgeot, just to get going most of the time. So you will have a good time against stuff like Charizard. However, some decks, particularly the Future Box deck, can probably be a bit more crafty, especially if they're playing the Dragon-type Rhydon and stuff. So you will have to be careful, and it is wise to have other attackers. And some of these lists, as we'll see, do play other attackers. It's not just going to be Quad Scizor. I just thought I'd, get that out of the way before we take a look at the lists. So some new cards that we have to take a look at. I know a lot of people have already seen these cards, so of course, feel free to skip ahead. But Prime Capture, just a really good gust effect, of course, although I will say that Prime Capture is probably going to be the most expensive A-Spec out of this new set. So, yeah, if you're looking to build Scizor as a budget deck, then maybe even any A-Spec might be too expensive. But just because of how good these A-Specs will be until they rotate out, basically, until these EX cards rotate out, especially for Maximum Build, I will just say they are worth it in the long run to pick up. Obviously wait and see if they go down a bit in prices. And if you're joining Temporal Forces as like your first deck, essentially, and you want Scizor or something similar to be your first deck, then what I would say is, hold off maybe on purchasing an A-Spec and see if they do just go down in price, or if you can trade one off a friend for a reduced price. But yeah, Maximum Belt is a really good one as well for these decks, plus 50 damage to opponent's EX. Basically just means that if your opponent feels like they're going to get one killed by Scizor, what they might do is not play down another Pokemon with an ability. And then you can be like, oh, that's funny, I'm just going to attach a Maximum Belt, and all of a sudden I'm doing that plus 50 damage that I needed. So it also just helps you, reach even higher damage with Scizor. So yeah, very, very good card in these decks. So the very first list that we're going to take a look at is a very easy to play bog standard build. There's really nothing crazy going on this list. Also, something worth mentioning, which I probably should have mentioned at the start, is that all of these lists do feature Radiant Charizard as their Radiant choice. So if you're a fan of Radiant Charizard, you'll definitely like Scizor. But basically, the most interesting aspect about this list, for me personally at least, is either the stadiums or the low kicks line. So this is something that actually featured in LDF's take on Scizor recently. He did a video on Scizor that was really good. Basically, what this low kicks allows you to do is actually get a one-hit kill on Charizard with either a Maximum Belt or a Defiance Band and a Practice Studio, I believe. I'm pretty sure you can get a one-hit kill on Charizard with a Practice Studio and Defiance Band. I might have to double check that. But either way, low kicks is kind of there to deal with Charizard, and then of course you have Radiant Charizard, low kicks. Yeah, I got confused there because there's two Charizards, but yeah, low kicks to deal with Charizard EX, and then your own Radiant Charizard to deal with like other EX stacks, basically. So yeah, very nice in that sense. It's a very consistent deck, playing 4 copies of a new Buddy Buddy Poffin, which will allow you to find 2 Pokemon from your deck with 70 HP or less. And that's just going to be really good. It basically means you can find all your basics with that card, except for Radiant Zard, which you can just use Nespel for, so it's fine. Overall, I would say this list is very consistent. I like the Squirvet B-Barrel package. I think it's really good. And of course, playing that Maximum Belt. So yeah, pretty solid overall, and definitely seems like a very nice place to start if you're getting off into the game. Next up, though, is very clearly the work of a player who said, I'm going to really miss Zorobox post-rotation, and thought they'd basically create this pile of a deck. I personally think this one will be a bit more flippant than most of the other decks that we're going to look at today. I mean, this, at a first glance, kind of just looks like Zorobox minus the Zorok. But yeah, playing a lot of different stuff. At the heart of the deck, though, is that Scizor line, as well as playing the Cleavor, which does also evolve from Scyther, so nice option to have there. But this list is also playing a 4-4-2 line of Kirlia and Gallade. So Gallade does actually survive rotation. I didn't think this Gallade originally survived rotation. I thought it was Chilling Rain. But nope, it's Astral Radiance. And what that card will allow you to do is search your deck for a supporter card once per turn, which is nice because it's essentially just some more Iono-proof, effectively. It's also nice as an attacker, does 160 for 3, so you could, in theory, use Reverse Energy to attack with it, so nice option there. And then the Cleavor is kind of just here for stuff like Miraidon and Iron Hands, and Iron Hands does look to be pretty good post-rotation, in fairness, so I can definitely see why Cleavor is a good option here. Also got the Slowbro, which is a card that I admittedly keep forgetting about as being a thing. But essentially, if you don't know what this does, it says if your opponent has 1 prize card remaining, you take 2 prize cards. So you kind of, if you're like ever in a position where your opponent is just ahead in the game towards a late game, what you can kind of do is set up a Slowbro play, which is a bit more awkward to do and a bit harder because you don't have a Zork surprise factor. You do have to bench Slowpoke and then evolve into Slowbro. But what you can do is take 4 prize cards and then let your opponent go down to 1 prize card and then switch into Slowbro and take the final, 2 prize cards. I do like Slowbro in that sense, but, it is a bit risky to pull off. This deck is also playing the Luxray. That says you can just put it onto the bench if you're behind on prizes. Very nice. And it also has the attack, which I'm just going to say is Vault Thunder or whatever it's called. But either way, for 3 energy, it does 180 damage. So it's quite nice. Definitely nice for KOing Lugia, actually. So yeah, that's probably why it's in the list, actually, to KO Lugia. But yeah, if you're playing Reverse Energy in any of these decks, you might as well add a Luxray for Lugia. Very good card. Also got the Radiant Zard, of course, and then we also have the Meteor, which is there for Snorlax control. Basically just when it kills a Snorlax, which is quite nice. Then we also have the Basculin, which isn't a card that sees a lot of play outside of Japan, but it basically just allows you to search your deck for 2 basic Pokemon and put them onto your bench. I personally don't think Basculin is super great. It's quite a cuttable card, if you just want to add something else to the list, but what would you add? I don't know, to be honest. Maybe the deck already plays Manaphy. I was going to say Manaphy, but deck already plays it. Maybe a second Double Turbo, actually, because you're a bit light on the energy count, only playing 7. So, yeah, I'd say maybe another energy, actually, instead of the Basculin. But either way, just my 2 cents. Also playing a Manaphy, of course, for some bench protection, which is nice. And playing the Minion V, which does also give you access to 4 Sealed Stone. Now, both of these cards can be quite pricey. So, if you're playing this as a budget player, IRL, then wouldn't be surprised if you wanted to cut them out. But yeah, that's kind of it for the Pokemon. Trainers, nothing too crazy, although looking at the trainers, there is some very interesting supporters going on. I mean, 1 Arusa, 1 Arvin, 1 Roxanne, 1 Cynthia's Ambition, 1 Lysander, 1 Professor Scenario, 1 Rosanna's Backup, 1 Thornton. I'm not sure about all of this, to be honest. I think that's way too many one-off supporters. I'd rather just be a bit more consistent. I like spicy decks as much as the next person, but I think this one might be just a bit too spicy for me personally. But yeah, let me know what you think about this one down below. Okay, so this next one is kind of like back to normality, I guess. Still got the Basculin though. And this one, funny enough, isn't actually playing Kirlia. It's playing the Liepard, which is an interesting choice, but to be fair, with no level ball post-rotation, there's no reason not to play the 100 HP variant of Kirlia, which is Liepard, which says once in your turn you may discard a card from your hand, draw 2. So it's identical to Kirlia. So if you do actually want to play the Gallade from Astral Radiance and, play Reverse Energy, because this list is playing Reverse Energy, I think it's worth it, then you could just, play Kirlia and Gallade, which might just be better, to be honest. But you can see why they went for Liepard. Just gives you a bit of extra protection against Rain and Greninja, which is nice. So if you don't get Manaphy bench down, or they KO it, then that could be quite cool. But aside from that, this list isn't anything too crazy. Playing the Jirachi that everyone seems to have forgotten about. Also playing 2 copies of Ditto, which will just mean that if you start the game with it, you can just switch into it. Switch into any basic Pokemon, if you start the game with it, which I think is... It's okay, to be honest. I don't think it's very good unless you're playing stuff like Mimikyu, I want to say. Yeah, Mimikyu. Which I think would be a nice option in a deck like this. Especially since you're playing Luminous and Basic Energy. Mimikyu could be a cool option, but either way, yeah. I'm not so sure I like this list, though. I think a 4-4 Scizor line is probably pushing it as well. You might just need less Scizor and more other attackers, but either way, a cool list. Although I would say this one might be slightly inferior to the very first list that we looked at. Next up, though, isn't strictly a budget deck. I know, I'm sorry, broke my own rules here, but I did want to feature a sort of upgraded budget Scizor deck, and that is going to be featuring a 4-4 line of Arceus, which isn't cheap, even by today's standards. Arceus is still seeing decent success. It's still going to be quite expensive to pick up. But if you do have someone who will lend you or sell you some Arceus cheaply, then this could be the deck for you. Also, could just be a fun variant of Arceus to play, if you're interested in Arceus, I guess. But yeah, Arceus Scizor, very understandably a nice combo, just because Arceus kind of wants a single prize attacker sometimes, and, something to deal big damage, because Arceus actually capping at like 180 is, well, 200 if you don't use a double turbo, but still, it's not really a lot of damage, and Scizor can reach all the way to like 250, 300 even sometimes, so like having that is a nice option. Also playing Bibarel just as a 1-1 line, which I think is a bit sketch and no Hisuian Heavy Ball, but yeah, 1-1 line of Bibarel. Then 1 copy of Cramorant, because you are playing 4 Colorless Experiment in this deck, so you might as well add it in as an additional attacker, as well as the 1 copy of Radiant Zard. As for the trainers, this is where things get a bit sketch for me again. 1 Aromatic Incense. I don't think this card is worth it at all. I'd rather just play something else. What else? Maybe a Buddy Poffin and just add a mana fee so you have 1 more target for it. But yeah, Aromatic Incense doesn't seem worth it to me personally. 1 Trekking Shoes is okay, I guess. It just effectively means you're playing a 59 card deck though. 1 copy of Switch is okay. Prime Catcher, again, quite expensive. And then TM Crisis Shot, I believe that is. So that's 280. Or is it 300? Wait, what is Crisis Shot? Is it 280 or 300? I think it's 280. But yeah, 280, and then you can only use it if you have only 1 prize card remaining or something. It's a fickle tool, but it can be used with Cramorant and Arceus, so I guess it's okay. But yeah, interesting list overall. But either way, thank you for watching. I definitely will be trying out some Scizor post rotation, hopefully catch some people off guard, although most players on TCG Live are quite wise, They do understand what you're playing and they will play around it, but either way, I think Scizor has at least some decent potential post rotation. So yeah, thank you for watching and let me know what you think down below. Thank you for watching.